Hey guys, how you doing? Just out for my regular walk. Oh, day 2 of unemployment. What a strange time after getting fired for even bringing up unionization in the workplace. Here I am. I've decided I'm going to commit myself to reading a lot more. I find that now that I've got the time, like, why not? I have a book that I started reading. It's you're gonna love this title, "The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich." It's a book I bought about a year ago, big tome, chunk. It's broken up into multiple books. This morning I just finished book 1. And as I've been thinking about it and I've been contemplating it, and what it does is it goes through the early life and the sort of rise of Hitler up to his arrest after after his attempt to foment a coup against the established government in Germany. So, and it ends with his release after he writes Mein Kampf. And so, while I was going through it and while I was reading it, my mind, of course, chews away on the comparisons between capitalism and communism. And I've been having more than one conversation with some friends about my decision to name this channel the Canadian Communist, or the Canadian Commie. And it's the classic stuff, right? It's the classic, like, well, atrocities happened under communism, therefore communism is illegitimate. And I always find that to be a very odd argument, because, I mean, especially as you read through a book like The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich, right? Which is, like, Hitler was operating in a capitalist society, that there were many elements at play. There was still sort of an old monarchy that was on its last legs and fading out. There was a new and established Weimar Republic, which was a democratic system, erected by the Social Democrats in Germany, the actual socialists, right, who had worked very hard to make Germany a good place to be, a wonderful place to be. And of course, the capitalists in Germany don't care for that, right? Capitalists want to destroy workers' unions. They want to destroy workers' organizations. They want to destroy and enslave workers for themselves. The Rise and Fall of the Third Reich doesn't go into the economics of Germany too heavily, but it does point out that many of Hitler's backers are industrialists and bankers, right? People who have economic influence and people who have the desire to have a bunch of people do their work for them while they do nothing. And it strikes me as I'm reading this book, like, okay, so it's odd to me that an atrocity that happens under communism, let's take one that can't be debated, right? Let's take one that can't really be refuted, which is the Holodomor. I hope I'm pronouncing that right. I'm probably not. The Holodomor. There's another O in there that I'm mispronouncing. I apologize. I'm sure of it. So, in the Holodomor, I mean, this is an atrocity, and it can't be defended, right? It can't be denied. You could perhaps put forward an idea that the Russians and Stalin were not aware of the famine as it unfolded, that they didn't have the ability to put forward an adequate system in order to salvage. But really, I think you do have to just point at the fact that they were still exporting food out of Ukraine as the Ukrainians were going through this famine. And that's enough, right? In my view, that's enough to say, okay, this was at the very least an acknowledgement that there was some kind of atrocity or some kind of natural disaster going on. And instead of doing the one thing that you could have done to salvage it, which is let people keep the food that they grow, you exported food out of the country, out of the counties and out of the country. I mean, that's the same sin that the capitalists did to the Irish during the Irish potato famine, right? Exporting food out of their country, out of their nation, while they're simultaneously undergoing a famine. And for some reason, the Irish potato famine doesn't destroy capitalism. So I don't, I hold capitalists to the same regard that they hold themselves, right? If those atrocities aren't going to destroy capitalism, then something like the Holodomor, I don't think, dismantles communism. But that doesn't mean that we can't learn something from that and look at it and say, okay, what does that mean? Like, what does it mean? And how do we avoid this in the future? And how did that even occur? What is the backbone of it? The capitalists are quick to point out, oh, it's communism itself. That communism itself as a system will generate these sorts of things. I don't think it's true, and I think it's kind of lazy and facetious to say that. I think the problem actually is quite a lot deeper than that, because if you have scenarios that unfold both under capitalism, which is a system designed to enslave and destroy everything, as well as under a system that is at least attempting to find some kind of amelioration amongst the individual workers, if you have a similar scenario crop up underneath both systems, as has happened, then you are looking at something that is much deeper, that is much more ingrained in the human consciousness and the human mindset than an economic structure or any ideology. And really it comes down to it's even deeper than saying something like racism, right? Like, you could say that the Russians have a racism towards Ukraine, and I'm sure the Ukrainians would agree with that, given their long history of struggle against the Russians, including into the modern era. But I think it's even a little bit deeper than simply saying racism, which there's a tribalism, there's a type of bigotry that exists within the heart of humanity that we have to acknowledge. And looking at something like the Holodomor is a perfect opportunity to do just that, to say that, well, communism wasn't able to solve this problem, right? And communism, even while simultaneously the communists that were doing it were saying that they were for the workers and for an egalitarian society, right, created this kind of horrible nonsense situation. And so to me, instead of simply rejecting communism as an idea because of this event, we have to look at this event and say, okay, what generated it? What created it? How do we avoid it? And in many ways, it is this kind of simple come down to, like, we have to look at one another as equals, regardless of our gender, regardless of our race, regardless of any of that kind of stuff. And when you actually take a look at the history between capitalism and communism and ask yourself, well, which system and which societies do we feel have achieved that with larger veracity, I come down on the side of communism, right? I come down and I say, look, the communists are at least attempting. They're not always successful, obviously, but they're at least making the attempt, and they succeed. And they exceed with more veracity than capitalist societies do. I mean, take a look at Hitler. Why is it that I'm supposed to completely demonize communism because of Stalin, but capitalism gets a free pass while Mussolini and Hitler are their flag bearers, right? Like, Hitler's Mein Kampf, like, one of the things that's interesting about the Third Reich, the rise and fall of the Third Reich, is it's very explicit that this racist mindset that Hitler had was in him at a very early age. And it's something that was also not uncommon in the German people themselves. Obviously, like Hitler is able to rise to power even after, like in Mein Kampf, he's very explicit that the Jews are a scourge and they have to be eliminated. The Jews and the Marxists, by the way. Hitler was scathing against the Marxists, which makes sense why, like, a lot of Hitler's arguments against Marxists are finding fertile ground again in our own societies, right? And people pretend as though you can say things like cultural Marxism and these days and maintain a kind of intellectual credibility, but in my view, you truly can't. Like, that's Hitler. That's an argument that comes out of the mouth of Adolf Hitler. Cultural Marxism is not really a thing that exists. Anyway, this one's getting a bit windy. I suppose I'm a bit unfocused these days, you know. But I think the thrust of what I'm trying to say and the thrust of what I'm trying to get at is that, of course, communist societies are going to go through horrible periods, right? Humans are involved. Like, there's no way around this. We can't actually do anything about that. Like, humans are eternally valuable. They are eternally greedy, envious. But the difference is, are we erecting systems that reward those kinds of negative behaviors, which I would argue very strongly that capitalism does. Take a look at the current Yemeni genocide that's going on. Take a look at the current destruction of Libya, the current destruction of Iraq, instead of like a thing that happened 100 years ago. That's the funniest thing. Like, you bring up like black slavery to a pro-capitalist and they'll say, oh, that was so long ago. Why are we even talking about that? Oh, slavery was so long ago. But they'll bring up an event that happened even farther down the line than that, the Harlem Door, and be like, this destroys the entire system. Oh, interesting. Interesting how that works. And to me, the difference, that is the key difference and the key reason why I think I plant my flag on communism, because the communists are at least attempting to ameliorate these things. They're at least attempting to find a way to to create a more egalitarian and more open society. They're at least making the attempts to do this. And I don't buy into the propaganda or the lies that surround this. Like, people today who are saying to me, oh, there's no example of a successful socialist or communist society. And I'm literally like, the Chinese are a socialist society with endeavors to becoming a communist society. And they're going to have the most powerful economy in the world in about 5-6 years, unless the Americans do something incredibly drastic to pull the ship up, but they're not going to do that. And like, that is the position we find ourselves in. And it's the weird mental gymnastics that happen from this, where suddenly China, a place that calls itself socialist, right? A place that says that it is rooted in Marxist ideals, that it is moving towards communism, that it is attempting to get these things done. Suddenly, no, it's actually doing all that through capitalism. Oh, interesting. So when communism is successful, it becomes capitalism, according to the capitalists. And more I'm seeing this kind of like mental gymnastics that's going on, where like the fascists are supposed to be socialists, so they're on the far left, is a narrative that comes out of the libertarian and far right crowd, when it's incredibly obvious to everyone that the Nazis co-opted a socialist organization and then did absolutely nothing to and then moved it to the far right, and then did absolutely none of the socialist stuff that it was claiming to do. In fact, quite the opposite. I'm looking forward to getting into the next books. I've done some reading on Hitler's Nazi government, and I'm hoping they get into this, that Hitler is the one who starts to privatize large sections of the public sector. He moves against socialists in order to destroy them. And I mean, but this is how capitalists operate, right? They use propaganda, and which isn't to say that communists don't use propaganda, but to me the difference is like communist propaganda is usually revolves around something that actually happened and something that is true, whereas capitalist propaganda generally just lies, and they double down on that Hitler strategy of tell a lie. If you tell a lie long enough, right? If you tell a lie long enough, it becomes the truth. And really looking forward to getting into the next books, and I'll be definitely talking about them more on this channel, because that's something I think we all have to do. We have to not only, and this is the struggle for the left, right, is to we have to not only research our own ideas and our own theories and our own failings, right, and have to admit them and work through them. We not only have to do that, we also have to research and know a lot about our enemies, right? And we have to know that they're our enemies, and we have to know that they're trying to destroy us, right? We have to be aware of that, and we have to know who they are. And so to be a leftist and to be on the left means you have to be extremely well read and you have to be extremely knowledgeable. Whereas to be on the right, like, you can just double down on whatever bigotries exist within your heart, right? And those bigotries that the left is not immune to, certainly, but that it at least acknowledges and attempts to move away from. Whereas the right wing is full of the classic kind of like, no, I worked for what I have, says, you know, the farmer on land given to him by the government, you know. Oh, that billionaire, he earned it, cries the people who are literally working for wage slave labor, like wages. It's we're in this sort of, and as like we're in this world that's polarizing itself, and it's dragging itself apart, and it more and more I seem to see that polarization is existent between people who are at least attempting to acknowledge reality and people who don't care about reality whatsoever, which is exactly what happened to the Germans before the signing of the Treaty of Versailles, right? On the lead up to the signing, like, the Germans lose World War I, right? And the Treaty of Versailles essentially is dictated to them from the Allies, the British primarily, and it's a humiliation for the Germans, right? Like, it's loaded with debt payments and land loss, things that the Germans and things that the German working class will never be able to pay. But on the lead up to this, the Germans think that they're going to walk away from this lost war completely cleanly. They live in this kind of delusional space. And so the British capitalists are of course not going to let them get away with that, right? The British capitalists are going to take their pound of flesh, because that's what capitalists do. They're not going to let Germany just walk away from a lost war. No, it takes something like the absolute unhinged atrocity that is the capitalist war of World War II, which again, we're supposed to completely ignore. We're supposed to completely ignore that was a capitalist war caused by capitalists that ends in nuclear bombardment. Like, we're supposed to ignore that and pretend like that doesn't exist. But that war gets so egregious and so outrageously evil, and obviously outrageously evil, that it ends actually in debt forgiveness for many nations. That many nations are just like, look, you can try to put any kind of debt reparations on us or anything like that, we'll never be able to pay. And there was an acknowledgement after World War II that one of the main causes of the rise of Hitler and the rise of that militarism that existed within the German state is the fact that they were placed with debts that they could never repay, and these debts humiliated the Germans and led them to this antagonistic place where they needed to fight a war amongst one another, because that's how capitalism resolves its conflicts, right? It can't come to the table and negotiate. It has to engage in full-scale war that ends in nuclear bombardment. And then you compare that to like communist regimes and communist societies. Like, where are the wide-scale genocides that have happened on the same scale as, let's say, the genocide of the Latino population or the genocide of the First Nations population? How about the enslavement of the black population? Like, these things get completely forgotten for some reason, like, and I'm supposed to just completely ignore them, while simultaneously bobbing my head and going like, oh yeah, like that one thing that happened, the Harlem Door, yeah, certainly bad, but I guess that discredits the entire project. Meanwhile, at the same time, like, American households literally have black slaves in them. Like, the entire country is built off of black slavery, and then the subsequent wage slavery that follows, and we're all just supposed to go along with that. Oh, interesting. So I think it is acceptable to accept the mistakes of our past, and to accept that there have been mistakes, and to find ways to ameliorate those mistakes. I think that it's important to look at something. The thing that I'm scared about for humanity moving forward isn't, and the reason why I try to say bigotry instead of racism, is because racism is a very narrow line, right? It's a divide that exists between skin color, but the future bigotries are going to be class-based. They are going to be drawn along, like, it's not going to matter what your skin color is, it's going to matter what your bank account looks like, right? Can you afford to be part of the wealthy class? And if you can't, then there must be something morally deficient with you, because those are the lines that capitalism draws. That if you can't or don't manage to exist within this upper strata, well, then the system that we have erected says that you are morally deficient, which is like this inverted way of thinking, in my view, that the system generates sociopaths and destructive forces who seize power in order to explicitly enslave the populace and explicitly draw wealth away from the working class and explicitly cause problems for people. Whereas those things are not explicit in communism, right? Those things are not explicit. That, again, communism is not immune to people who are greedy, people are or racists or any of this, but it doesn't explicitly reward them, which is exactly what capitalism does. Capitalism rewards sociopathic behavior. and encourages it and then generates more. And this to me is why communism is the superior ideology and is the superior way that we need to be thinking about the world around us. Oh, well, okay, I'm glad I did this video. I'm glad I got that off my chest. I'll probably be doing another one like this later on down the road, because this kind of conversation I'm sure is going to keep coming back my way, because propaganda works, right? There's a reason why the capitalists spend billions of dollars on advertising and billions of dollars on public relations, as they call it, right? Which is propaganda. And it's because it works, right? It influences the way people look at the world, because, and I don't get bitter about this, like, people don't have time to sift through a lot of this stuff. They don't have time to put a lot of effort or to contemplate these sorts of things, right? And again, Hitler laid the path, right? If you say the lie long enough and loud enough, it becomes the truth. And that the capitalists have taken that to heart, and they know that there is truth to that, and they know that the populace is not very skeptical, and they know that the populace has a certain degree of gullibility, and so will simply go along with things due to exhaustion, mainly, right? Okay, guys, this is going to be the end of this video. You can see I'm getting all icy bearded. Look at that. I'm getting super icy bearded. I hope you guys are doing well out there. I really do. Channel's doing well. I'm going to do a channel update when I hit 200. I'm at 192 right now. If you haven't subscribed to the channel and you are at this point, do me a favor, do yourself a favor, subscribe. I know you don't have a communist in your feed. Hi, I could be the communist in your feed. Please, oh yeah, like the video. Hey, that's a free thing that you can do. Just like the video right there, share the video. Really piss off your conservative and capitalist uncle or dad, right? Really get under their skin. Show them that their ideas are old and they need to go away. That's mean. I shouldn't have said that. Oh well, too bad, I said it. Yeah, love each other, man. Love each other. At least try, right? At least try to love each other. Because that's the whole point, right? The whole point is that we're supposed to try, instead of just sacrificing our lives to a system that's designed to destroy us. We need to try. And hey, go high-five the moose, right? Have a beer, smoke a joint. Do what you can to find that little moment of reprieve, right? And do try. Do try. That's the best that we can do these days. Don't let these guys gaslight you. That's super important. Okay, guys. Good luck. We're gonna need it.